Life Stories brings you real, raw, and inspiring tales of resilience, love, and self-discovery. Today's story is about Madison, a woman who thought she had a loving husband, until one shocking phone call changed everything. Betrayed, blindsided, and left to pick up the pieces. She could have crumbled, but instead, she fought back. What happens when the one who tried to destroy you ends up ruining himself? Stay with us as we unfold this gripping journey of justice, strength, and a fresh start. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story with Life Stories. The conference room buzzed with chatter, the hum of voices blending with the occasional clink of coffee cups and the soft rustling of papers. I sat at the long, polished table, barely listening to the discussion unfolding around me. My phone sat face down beside my notebook, ignored for the past hour. But when it vibrated, lighting up with an incoming call, my heart skipped a beat. Jake. I hesitated for a moment before stepping out into the hallway. He wasn't the type to call during work hours unless it was something important. Maybe a simple check-in. How's the trip? When will you be home? The usual small talk we exchanged when I traveled for work. But when I answered, his voice came through cold and smug. I'm divorcing you. For a second, I didn't understand what I had just heard. It was as if the words had failed to register. Or maybe I had misheard him. What? I'm divorcing you, he repeated, his tone almost triumphant. And I've already sold the apartment. The hallway felt like it tilted beneath me. The apartment, our apartment. The place we had built together. The home that I had poured my heart into. My grip tightened around the phone as the weight of his words settled over me. You sold the apartment? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. Yeah, Jake said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. Brooke and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway. Brooke. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected for months that there was someone else, his late nights. The sudden work trips. The emotional distance that had grown between us like an ever-widening canyon. But to hear him say her name so casually, as if I were the intruder in their perfect little world, made my blood run cold. Sounds good, I wanted to say. Sounds like a dream come true. Jake, best of luck to you both. But my throat tightened, the words refusing to come. Instead, I took a slow breath and forced myself to reply. Okay. He paused, clearly expecting a bigger reaction. Maybe anger, maybe tears. But I gave him nothing. I was numb. It wasn't just the betrayal, though that was sharp enough to carve right through me. It was the sheer arrogance. The way he spoke as if he were doing something completely reasonable. The way he laughed like this was some minor inconvenience I'd have to work around. The absolute lack of remorse. And yet, deep down, I wasn't even surprised. For years, I had ignored the small cracks in our marriage, convincing myself that love was enough to smooth them over. I had told myself that his dismissiveness wasn't a problem, that his reluctance to talk about our finances was just how he was. I had believed his charming smile and his easy reassurances. I had trusted him, and now he had taken everything I had built with him and thrown it away like it was nothing. Except, he hadn't. Jake didn't know. The deed had been in my name alone for months. Earlier that year, we had refinanced to secure a lower interest rate. And as part of that process, I had the deed transferred into my name. Jake had signed the paperwork without much thought, not bothering to ask about the details. I remembered the moment so clearly now, his hand moving over the documents in smooth, confident strokes, his eyes barely skimming the text. He had assumed he was still in control. And now, his arrogance was going to be his downfall. I didn't let my voice betray anything as I said, I see. Thanks for letting me know, Jake. He hesitated, perhaps still waiting for me to explode, to plead, to fight for him. I hung up before he could say anything else. As I stood in the empty hallway, staring blankly at the wall in front of me, the numbness began to fade, replaced by something else. A slow burning fire ignited in my chest. He thought he had won. He thought he had pulled the rug out from under me, taken away my security, and left me scrambling. But he was wrong. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, my shock had transformed into something sharper. Resolve. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. Jake wanted a fight? Fine. This was a fight I was going to win. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring out at the city skyline. The lights of Chicago twinkled against the dark sky. But my mind was miles away, back in Manhattan. Back in the apartment Jake thought he had stolen from me. My phone was still in my hand. My fingers clenched so tightly around it that my knuckles had turned white. I had replayed the conversation over and over in my head, dissecting every word, every smug pause, every careless laugh. He had called me just to gloat, to twist the knife and enjoy the sound of my world crashing down. But he had underestimated me. I inhaled deeply, forcing my breath to steady. This wasn't the time for anger, it was time for action. I scrolled through my contacts and found the one person who could help me untangle this mess. Danielle. She picked up on the second ring. Madison, are you okay? I'm fine, I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. I need your help. There was no need to explain why I was calling her. Danielle had been my best friend since college and had been with me through everything, graduations, late-night heartbreaks, and now, a divorce I hadn't seen coming. But more than that, she was a damn good lawyer. Tell me everything, she said, her voice shifting into professional mode. I laid it all out. Jake's phone call, his smug declaration, his claim that he had sold the apartment. Danielle was silent for a long moment. Then she let out a short, incredulous laugh. Does he even realize that he can't sell the apartment without your consent? Apparently not, I said, and for the first time that night, amusement flickered through me. This idiot really thought he could pull this off. She muttered, all right. First things first. We need to notify the buyer that the sale is invalid. If money has changed hands, that's fraud on Jake's part. The word sent a sharp thrill through me. Fraud. Good. Let him drown in the consequences of his own arrogance. What do I need to do? I asked. I'll draft the official notice tonight and send it to the buyer first thing in the morning. You need to get back to New York as soon as possible. The sooner we deal with this, the better. I checked my watch. My flight was already booked for tomorrow afternoon. But suddenly, that felt too far away. I wanted to be there now. I wanted to see the look on Jake's face when he realized he wasn't the master manipulator he thought he was. Danielle, I said, leaning back against the pillows. Exhaustion washing over me. I want to bury him. She chuckled. Trust me, Madison. He's already dug his own grave. We're just here to make sure he falls into it. I hung up and exhaled slowly, staring at the ceiling. The weight in my chest had lightened just a little. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this unscathed. By the time I arrived at the airport the next afternoon, my anger had settled into something cold and calculating. This was no longer about heartbreak. This wasn't about grief or loss. This was about justice. And I was going to make sure Jake paid for every last bit of it. The cab ride from JFK to my apartment felt like the longest of my life. The city streets blurred past. A swirl of yellow cabs, honking horns, and pedestrians in a hurry. I barely noticed. My mind was fixated on one thing: seeing Jake's face when he realized his grand plan had crumbled to dust. As we neared the building, a familiar knot of anxiety coiled in my stomach. This was the place I had once felt safe. The home I had built. And now it felt like enemy territory. I squared my shoulders. No, this was still my home. He was the intruder. I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and strode through the lobby, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The doorman, Mr. Benson, gave me a sympathetic look. Ms. Carter, he said, shifting uncomfortably. Mr. Carter has been here all day. He seemed agitated. I bet he was. Thanks, Benson, I said with a tight smile before heading to the elevator. The ride up felt endless, each ding of the floors ticking down the seconds until the confrontation. My heart pounded, but I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The moment I stepped inside the apartment, I knew he was there. His cologne, one I had once loved, now sickeningly familiar, hung in the air. The living room was exactly as I had left it, except for one thing. Jake was standing in the middle of it, his face red with fury, gripping a piece of paper, Danielle's legal notice. What the hell is this? He demanded, waving it in the air. I dropped my suitcase by the door and crossed my arms. That's the legal proof that you don't own this apartment. Jake. You never did. His expression faltered for a moment before twisting into something ugly. That's bullshit. He snapped. We bought this place together. I let out a slow, deliberate sigh, savoring the moment. No, Jake. I bought it. And after we refinanced, the deed was transferred to my name. You signed the paperwork without reading it. Typical. For the first time since this whole mess started. I saw it. The flicker of doubt in his eyes. The realization creeping in. You're lying, he said, but it was weaker this time. I walked to the kitchen counter, where I had left a folder before my trip. I pulled out the deed and held it up. See for yourself. He snatched it from my hands and scanned the document. His face drained of color. You, his voice cracked. You tricked me? I scoffed. Oh, don't flatter yourself. This wasn't about you. It was a financial decision I made for my property. You just happened to be too careless to notice. He clenched his jaw, his hands tightening around the paper. This doesn't change anything, he said, but I could hear the panic creeping in. I already made a deal with the buyer. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Oh, you mean the buyer who now knows this sale was fraudulent? The one who might press charges against you for taking their money? His face contorted with rage. You did this. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. No, Jake. You did this. You were so busy screwing me over. You forgot to check the facts. And now? You're the one who's screwed. For the first time in years, I saw him for what he really was. Not the confident, charming man I had once loved. Not the partner I had believed in. Just a fraud. A desperate man, scrambling to salvage a plan that had already crumbled beneath him. You can't kick me out. He tried, voice thick with desperation. Oh, I absolutely can, I said, stepping closer, my voice steady. And I will. But I'm feeling generous. I'll give you a few days to pack your things and figure out where you're going next. His nostrils flared, his jaw tightening, but there was nothing he could say. Because he knew. He had lost. The silence in the apartment after Jake left was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The weight of his presence, his entitlement, his lies, everything was gone. It was just me now. Me, my home, and the quiet realization that I had won. I walked through the apartment, taking in every inch of space. The oversized gaming chair he had insisted on keeping? Gone. The framed jerseys cluttering the walls? Packed away. The gaudy coffee table that never quite fit my style? No longer in my way. The space looked brighter, lighter, like it belonged to me again. Lauren came over that evening, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine. She flopped onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. So, he's really gone? Gone, I confirmed, pouring us both a glass of wine. And not coming back. She raised her glass. To fresh starts and well-deserved victories. I clinked mine against hers. Smiling. To never letting someone walk all over me again. Over the next few days, I reclaimed the apartment piece by piece, filling it with things that made me happy. It wasn't just about redecorating, it was about turning this place into a reflection of who I was. Not the person Jake had tried to make me. And when Danielle called to tell me the divorce was finalized, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of something new. Something better. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring life stories.